Okay, just waiting for a few people to log in here, and then we'll start the webinar. So, tēnā koutou katoa, and welcome to NZILA Tua Pita Ora Streetscape webinar. I'm Angela Hunter, the COO for NZILA Tua Pita Ora, and today we're delighted to welcome our first speaker in the series for the year, Gabriel Díaz Montemayor, as well as our facilitator and host, Gina Langridge from Boffa Mescal in Christchurch. I'll hand over to Gina in a moment, but first we'd just like to give a huge thanks to our webinar sponsor, Streetscapes, who they're instrumental in making this series happen for us and for all of our members. So yeah, thanks, Streetscapes. For our registered members, this session is worth 1 CPD point, so please make sure that you log that. In a moment, we'll share with you a short video from Streetscapes highlighting their products and services, and we always encourage you to reach out to Paul and the team to chat over any ideas that you might have for your next street furniture project, and go and visit their website, Streetscapes website. Again, thanks for joining us today. Gina will join you after this video has finished, and for those going to Wānanga, I look forward to seeing you there next week.
Streetscape is New Zealand's leading manufacturer of quality street furniture, lighting poles, shelters, and sculptures that breathe life into our open space environments. Collaborating with landscape architects and designers to share our manufacturing expertise and experience, we create solutions to meet your design brief, your budget, and your project delivery deadline. At Streetscape, we have a great range of off-the-shelf furniture. Together, we can modify and customize our existing ranges to suit, or we can provide the design support to manufacture fully bespoke furniture for your project. With all furniture proudly manufactured in New Zealand from locally and ethically sourced materials, and with over 100 years of combined experience, you can be sure of the craftsmanship. Quality products made to withstand our unique environmental conditions while meeting all local health and safety standards. Local doesn't just mean local knowledge and local jobs. It also means reduced lead times and a local team who manage every step of the way with you to see the project from your concept through to final delivery. Aotearoa, New Zealand, these are our places, our communities, our environments, and we want you to enjoy them the way you imagine them. That's why we go that extra mile every time. Streetscape, turning your imagination into reality. Streetscape, in conjunction with the NZILA, are proud to sponsor the Streetscape Speaker Series.
Tēnā koutou. I'm Gina Langridge. I'm a landscape architect at Boffa Mescal in Otatahi, Christchurch. I would like to welcome our speaker today, Gabriel Díaz Montemayor. Gabriel is an Associate Professor of Landscape Architecture at the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design at the University of Arkansas. Previously, Gabriel was a faculty member at the University of Texas in Austin and at the Design School of Arizona State University. Gabriel's research and teaching is concentrated in the socio-ecological reconciliation and regeneration of the borderlands shared between the United States and Mexico, and in the advocacy and development of Latin American-specific landscape architectures. Gabriel's research is published in academic journals such as the Journal of Urbanism, the Plan Journal, Sustainability, Land, Curb, among others. Gabriel's work is also published in professional journals such as Landscape Architecture Magazine, Arquine Magazine, Progressive Planning, and Landom. Gabriel has guest lectured at multiple institutions in the USA, including Harvard's Graduate School of Design, City College, New York, the University of Arizona, Rhode Island School of Design, and the University of Pennsylvania, and in numerous Latin American universities across Mexico, Puerto Rico, Colombia, Ecuador, and Bolivia. Gabriel holds both a Bachelor of Architecture and a Master's of Landscape Architecture. His bio is noted on the events page with more information. We will have a Q&A session at the end of Gabriel's presentation, so please put any questions you have in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Over to you, Gabriel.
Thank you very much, Gina, and thank you everyone here in this presentation. This is the first time that I have had the opportunity to share some of my work over there in New Zealand. Although I think the closest I have been was through an article that was mentioned, a published article in the journal Curve from Australia. I'm going to proceed to share my screen now and get going with the presentation that I propose to all of you. Okay. Well, the presentation is titled Runoffs, Overflows, and Migrations in the US-Mexico Border Region as an exploration of the agency of landscape architecture. I am not going to be literal with regards to actual runoff volumes or overflow volumes, but fundamentally, I'm going to make the case for the role of shared natural systems between the US and Mexico, in particular, those that have to do with water, first and foremost, and then also, of course, the relationship of water with shared watersheds and eventually also, of course, shared ecosystems. I am also going to present a couple of, generally speaking, a couple of larger projects that I have engaged with over the years. In some cases, well, actually, generally speaking, ever since I started practicing as an architect first, and then in the field of landscape architecture. So before I delve into the specific project areas, let me just start with a little bit about context, but also how this particular context relates to my personal upbringing and my professional development. Having been born in the central Mexico city of Guadalajara, in this case in the map down there, but having spent most of my life in the city of Chihuahua, the capital of the state of Chihuahua in northern Mexico. The state of Chihuahua is a border state with the United States, both with the state of Texas and the state of New Mexico. Through my early teaching in architecture first, I leveraged this binational relationship of the border region, which is pervasive. It's both cultural, social, economic, and as it happens, one of the first points of contacts I had with the United States professionally and academically happened with the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, given that the city of Chihuahua and the city of Albuquerque are sister cities, and somehow that triggered actual collaborations between academic institutions in both cities. Eventually, and also through a number of connections and acquaintances that I had the opportunity to do when I was teaching with my Chihuahua students, doing a couple of joint studios with Albuquerque, I came to the United States, where I remain, where I'm speaking from right now. I first came to the US to study landscape architecture at Auburn University, which led to my first full-time academic position in the United States, as mentioned as well, when I was a faculty member at Arizona State University, based in Phoenix, or the metropolitan area of Phoenix, Arizona, which is where half, or the significant part of the projects that I'm going to comment today were initiated. Then I moved over to Austin, Texas, as I took a position at the University of Texas at Austin, which eventually led to where I am right now in my capacity as an associate professor of landscape architecture, operating from Northwest Arkansas, which is the farthest away I have lived as a professional from the actual international borderline between the United States and Mexico. So in that context, very early on, it was clear to me that from the design fields, there was much to be done, much to be discussed. It was also important to me to respond to what oftentimes is, or I should say, dominates the conversation with regards to the borderlands between the US and Mexico. Most of the time, what we get from the news is, a federal level, presidential level. Right now, of course, is another moment of a lot of significant sound coming from the region, given of the fact of this contested relationship. But at the same time, I was interested very early on demonstrating that there is a very different reality on the ground, not just on the ground, right in the communities that actually share the border, but actually cities like my city, Chihuahua City, which is 350 kilometers away from the city of El Paso, which is where this photo is taken. A photo, as you're looking at right now, taken 23 years ago with my students from Chihuahua, Mexico. At the time, that monument is just a border marker. You can see there is no fence. There is a fence now, but at the time, and for most of the relationship between the United States and Mexico, the fences have been a progression of accumulation. As of now, this place is a different place, which makes me actually mark where the actual border was at the time. I continue to take students and continue, of course, this research interest in the US-Mexico border region. From Arkansas, farther away, of course, as I mentioned, I have done a number of academic design studios with my students, this time moving over to the east end of the US-Mexico border region, over to South Texas and the Mexican state of Tamaulipas, continuing this effort to understand, analyze, contribute, and put forward the very important and intense relationships that happen on the ground in this territory. In that context, it's important to mention that the US-Mexico border region has different ways, of course, to be determined. Politically speaking and administratively speaking, for the US and Mexico, one definition is a 200-kilometer wide strip, 100 kilometers into the US, 100 kilometers into Mexico. And on this strip, both countries have agreed to set up diverse collaborative efforts, in particular those that have to do with the environment. But of course, this is not enough and this is arbitrary. What I have been doing in this regard has been approaching it, as I mentioned, from the perspective of shared systems, starting with water. Fundamentally, this system is determined in this region by two large river sheds, one, the Colorado River to the west, and the other one, the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo watershed to the east, generally speaking. And it is in this context that I think it's particularly critical to approach the opportunities and the issues from the perspective of landscape architecture. Both countries have a long track record of agreements, disagreements in the management of this shared water. The most important one dates back to 1994, which is during the time, of course, of World War II, in which it was very important for both Mexico and the US to be allies and to support each other in the global tragedy of World War II. In this agreement, for example, most of the river shed of the Colorado River is in the United States, but critical farming and urban centers depend on water from this river in the Mexican side. So as part of this context, it's important to imagine that this relationship is about measuring, about sharing, deciding for the benefit of both nations. Of course, each one of the nations have their own particular interests, but it is a fact that there is a long and continued collaboration between both countries. I insist, this is something that is very well known, but sometimes it's sort of forgotten in between the lines of the contested newspaper articles and statements done, even more so during the current federal administration of the United States. So, but within all of these agreements, there are, of course, problems, right? Just to give an example, for example, the subwatershed of the Conchos River in a tributary of the Rio Bravo, Rio Grande River has been subject to a particularly critical situation, given that water is more scarce. Water is not the same as it was in 1994. And over the years, this has been, of course, a contested issue because farming depends, and not just urban communities, but in particular, farming depends on this water. This water that is dwindling, as demonstrated by, for example, this image, which is a water reservoir in Mexico, which, by the way, is built through the progressive construction of binational agreements for the implementation of irrigation districts, which result in dams and channels built both in Mexico and the US to distribute this shared water. Recently, this is an episode in this war that happened 4 or 5 years ago when Mexican farmers were protesting against the Mexican government, given that the Mexican government announced that it was going to pay water to the United States, water that Mexico owes and continues to owe to this day. Of course, Mexican farmers were unhappy about it because, giving water to the US means less water for their own farming activities. So as quoted here in this from this article published in the New York Times, Mexican farmers are in a fight for their lives because no water means no agriculture means no rural communities. Now, fast forward 4 or 5 years, and now this is just a quick sample of very recent newspaper notes with regards to the continued struggle with regards to water. The United States asking Mexico to pay that water debt, Mexico trying to make it work, but at the same time trying to balance these requests with Mexico's own needs. setting up altogether just a quick glimpse of the complexity with regards to water in this shared system. Now, with this very quick initial context, let me jump in with the first project, a project that has been going on for a number of years since I was a faculty member at Arizona State University in 2010. And then I go on with a second project, which is more recent, which is on the opposite end of the border, which is, generally speaking, an speculative, academic, and professional approach to the regeneration of the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo Delta. So projects for Ambas Nogales. Ambas Nogales are two cities, sister cities. This is the way they are referred to, generally speaking. There's a Mexican Nogales in the Mexican state of Sonora, and then there's an American Nogales in the American state of Arizona. You can see in this aerial view, not quite visibly, but as I point out with this dashed line, that's where the border is. Now, both cities share a very interesting story because they are both located within a tributary shed of to the Santa Cruz River, which is itself a tributary of the Rio Colorado or the Colorado River. Most of the watershed is in the Mexican side, but more importantly, probably, most of the population of these sister cities is found on the Mexican side. This is one other city in the Mexican side that has industrialized since about 60 or 50 years ago through the accumulation and growing role of economic agreements between the United States and Mexico, which are now again threatened. Both cities, therefore, share a long story of flooding. The cities are located, as you can see here on the map, right in the Nogales Creek. In other words, in the lowest point of the basin. And then add to that the presence of the border wall, which actually has functioned as a dam, as you can see here in this photo taken from the 2008 flood. There are successive floods, and this is a problem that always happens here in Ambas Nogales. This is just another image, 2018, of additional flooding. So here, first, I had the opportunity to be a participant of a binational grant funded by the Border 2010 program of the Environment Protection Agency of the U.S., and by the Ministry for the Environment from Mexico. These collaborations happen, and this is just one other example. The grant was calling for the study of solutions for water management and how this could be also an opportunity to produce public space or enhance the presence and quality of public space in the Mexican Nogales. This resulted in a report of which I'm only showing you very quickly the cover, given that I want to emphasize very specific aspects of both this first project and the second part of this project. The report was called City of Green Creeks, which was a compendium of sustainable flood management alternatives for Nogales, Sonora. Fundamentally putting together very well-known techniques for water management, green infrastructure, but also laying out these techniques as these are determined in their potential in relationship to the city and to the larger watershed, in their potential to produce several scales of open, accessible spaces from the urban to the peripheral or more, let's say, nature-oriented. The idea being to integrate the city to their creek system, which is, by the way, the reason why the city was called Nogales. Nogales pecan in Spanish, and this creek and territory was characterized by the presence of a number of native pecan tree species, which are now mostly substituted by oak trees in this region. The approach was picked up by Landscape Architecture magazine, that you may know, the magazine of the American Society of Landscape Architects. I just wanted to show you the cover fold of the article because it was very important for us to be understood as a study for a situation where floods demonstrate that there are no bounds for this. So student projects were included in this article, but most importantly, the idea was to put together this network of that I commented of public spaces with specific capacities for water management. 10 years later, we submitted again for another grant for the same program, but now Border 2020, also funded by the EPA, an international binationally funded project. This time around, essentially what we proposed with a much larger team, what we proposed was to address a similar situation, but now looking at both cities. And we had a much more technical capacity, much better technical capacity the second time around, because we had scientists that did water modeling for us, in addition to planning to do feasibility studies and intersecting that with the production of public space and, of course, water management again. The report presented in this second time around was titled Shared Solutions, Planning and Designing a Green Infrastructure and Public Space Network in the Sister Cities of Ambas Nogales. Very quickly, through an analysis and through the intersection of planning, water modeling, we identified the potential locations for new parks or open spaces or retrofitted public parks and open spaces, which were to be connected by a trail system, both urban and suburban or rural. And then from here, we identified a number of specific projects which we developed to a conceptual level with students, both from Arkansas, but also from Arizona, who were also involved in the project. So very quickly, ideas like this, in the grounds of a public school in Nogales, Arizona, how we could take advantage of the spatial availability to implement green infrastructure measures to capture water, mitigate flooding. The same in the case of Nogales, Sonora. All of these, I'm just throwing this out there for you if you're interested on reading more, because I'm always interested on translating these projects into peer-reviewed scholarship, as is the case of this article, which resulted from the grant, The Pathways to Greening Border Cities, a policy analysis for green infrastructure in Ambas Nogales. But comparing the project from 2010 and the project for 2020, the first thing to say is that the 2010 project was a top-down approach to an ecological planning vision, which was eventually translated 10 years later, to an approach in which we're trying to make it happen slowly but surely. We realized that the top-down approach was not going to make it happen. So we thought, what do we do different the second time around to make it happen? It was very clear to us that it was no longer, as it was clear since the very beginning, but the first project was like that. In the second project, we decided on a hybrid approach in which we are going to explore pilot projects to educate local communities of Nogales, Arizona, Nogales, Sonora, for the implementation of green infrastructure, so that everybody contributes to not just the larger flooding problem, but also everybody re-engages with this landscape, which is more than just a contested landscape. Right? It's a place of sharing. Right? So in this couple of pilot projects we did, we took advantage of what we refer to as captive communities in public schools in Sonora, and in the Sonora and Nogales. The first one was a middle school that you're looking at here in the conceptual plan. All of these projects were not right on the border. This one was happening just south. Well, not just a couple miles south or 3-4 kilometers south of the international boundary. We put together, nonetheless, even if it's a bottom-up project, of course, it had to have a foundation on an analysis with regards to water management and where the projects should need to happen. And then, of course, leading to the capacity to identify and zero in places where we could actually implement the projects in a very short time frame. The first project, as I mentioned, was this middle school, which was also conceptually developed with the students. But then eventually, the implemented project was a very simple project with very minimal budgets, working with the students, with the teachers, with the parents, essentially sharing and communicating and disseminating the capacity of very low budget infrastructures to both mitigate water, but also enhance the spatial quality of these landscapes, which are, as you can see, quite arid or semi-arid. This is not quite a desert, but it's very close to being a desert. And therefore, this management of water was not just the opportunity to contribute to a larger problem, but also to enhance the spatial qualities of this public school in Nogales, Sonora. Then the second pilot project, which was done in a residual space in a very low-income neighborhood in Nogales, Sonora. I'm showing you some stills taken from a video. I have come to just prefer to use stills from videos because sometimes the videos fail. But long story short, a second project in which we engage with a neighborhood organization in which we, through different organizations working in the team, and a design that came from Arkansas over there to the community, using donated materials, we implemented this time in the second pilot project a community or neighborhood organization based project, which using donated materials, plants, and even tools, and put together a very, very simple demonstration of green infrastructure in an otherwise residual space in this neighborhood. This is the leader of the neighborhood organization, in which she actually states in the video that they are very happy that we were there in their beautiful neighborhood, and that they really liked that project. So with that experience, let me move on to the second project. This second project, as I mentioned, in the opposite watershed between the US and Mexico, the watershed of the Rio Grande, as it is known in the US, or the Rio Bravo, as it is known in Mexico. Here, this is more of an accumulative approach of several academic studios, professional projects, and design speculation, in which I'm going to try to make the case, first of all, of the fact that it's a work in progress, and I don't really know where this one is leading, but hopefully it will lead to some capacity to make these communities aware of what they can do to re-engage with in a different way with this landscape. Why? Because as J.B. Jackson, the most important cultural landscape writer here in the US, he wrote in this very early article of his body of work, because rivers are meant to bring people together, not keep them apart, right? So, and there is a track record as well between the United States and Mexico with regards to collaboration towards ecological preservation. This is my favorite example, a very potent, very important example in this collaboration, which is often forgotten again. The fact that both countries agreed decades ago on the formation of a binational cluster of national parks in the Big Bend area, shared between the states of Texas in the US and Chihuahua and Coahuila in Mexico. This is what it is. You know, in this part of the border, the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo cuts through and creates a beautiful canyon that you're looking at. And this is an actual photo. People go there to hike, to to move from one country to the other. There is no point of building a wall right here, as you can see. And it's probably why it was easier to make it happen here. But the point is that, as you can see also in the image, the river is sometimes it's gone completely, as it was the case of this image from 3 years ago, right? But rivers are meant to bring people together, and this is something that happens in the Mexican side for sure. At this scale, there are a number of communities on the Mexican side that actually engage with the river in a festive approach. My favorite example is the city of Ciudad Miguel Alemán in the state of Tamaulipas in Mexico, where every year they hold a festival, the most important festival for this community, right here, in the river, which is connected to Roma, Texas, Mexico, the Mexican Ciudad Miguel Alemán, connected to the Texan Roma by these twin bridges, and the actual festival happening right underneath the bridges, as you can see in these images. These are images that I harvested today from the most recent edition of the fest, which happened just a few weeks ago. So moving downstream all the way to the delta, connecting with the Gulf of Mexico. Now, again, we have a river that is referred to in the US as the Rio Grande and in Mexico as the Rio Bravo. Now we have a Gulf, which is referred to in Mexico and the rest of the world as the Gulf of Mexico, and in the United States now, just a few months ago, as the Gulf of America, right? But we can also imagine that something similar could be and probably should be done, is my point, in the delta of the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo. And I am just adding up to the body of work of multiple organizations, researchers, institutions that look at this shared environment, of course. Another critical thing is that this is not just about human migrants, right? This is in this particular location, the critical condition is the fact that the delta is a critical habitat for the most important migratory flyway in the American continent. This delta is nowadays gone at 95%. Only 5% of the original delta habitat remains. Everything else has been taken up for agriculture and urbanization. But we still have this condition that is actually a critical condition for the economic viability as well of the delta communities, both in Mexico and the US. This is why there are a number of nature preserves as well in the delta, as you can see here in this photo taken from a nature preserve. These are my students from a couple of years ago in a nature preserve in the Texan side, taking pictures of Mexico on the opposite side. This is us in one of these lookouts, river lookouts in this nature preserve. There is a very important as well, cultural identity in this delta, which people refer to as valley, by the way. Of course, this is wrong. It is not a valley, it's a delta, but culturally speaking, people refer to it as a valley. And this is fundamentally a valley which is determined by the labor and the agriculture, right? Beautifully captured by a local artist, Gabriel Salazar, through this a series of kind of a naive, romantic as well, landscape paintings of the delta of the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo. So we are also looking at a place where the vast majority of the people that live here, of the 3 million people that live here, are Hispanic, right? Almost 93% of the population in the Texas side of the delta is Hispanic. Among the many reasons for this is, of course, the long shared history between the U.S. and Mexico. Of course, the fact that this was Mexico until the mid 19th century. Of course, the agricultural activity is going on, but also it's important to note, as I suggested, that locally, in addition to agriculture, bird and nature watching are one of the economic drivers of the Rio Grande Valley. Why? because this is only one of the few places in the United States where you can actually engage, bird watchers in particular, can see subtropical or tropical bird species, which adds to, to the interest. But my question is, who's doing the bird and nature watching, right? The fact is that even in a place where 93% of the population is Hispanic, the opposite happens when it has to do with engaging with nature and taking advantage of this engagement with nature. It's quite the opposite. The minority of the people that do engage with nature and bird watching are Hispanics. The majority are white Anglos or tourists that come to this place from as far away as Japan or Nordic countries. So another interesting situation on the Delta is that this is also a prime destination for wintering human seasonal migrants that come here because of the weather, fleeing away the winter from northern latitudes of the United States and even farther away from Canada, which gets to the point that, for example, one of the mobile home parks that are catering to this community, one of them is named Pine to Palm, just to give you an example of this very important pattern of human migration. In other words, this is not just about human migration from south or from the global south to the north, but also the opposite, right? From the north to the south. So in this complex and large binational community, as you can see here with the numbers between the larger cities in the Mexican side, the smaller cities in the US side, the opportunity lies once again on the preservation of nature from this perspective. There is a system of scattered nature preserves that you're looking at right now in this map. The majority of these, unfortunately, have paywalls because they are nature preserves, state parks in Texas or foundation managed preserves. These nature preserves are not for free, which essentially furthers the problem of who has access or not to nature. Another important consideration here is, of course, that there is another fundamental presence of a binational infrastructure system built through agreements and investment both by Mexico and the United States to manage flooding, but also to irrigate these fertile agricultural districts, dating all the way back to the 1930s, almost 100 years ago, right? So in this context, since the very beginning, the binational efforts were understood to be an opportunity to preserve the river to the point that, as you can see here, the nature preserve administrators over time have stated the will to connect this string of pearls along the river to enhance but not just the recovery of the river, which is largely lost, as I mentioned, but also enhance the opportunities to engage with nature. So there are multiple cities, towns, stakeholders here that are stewards of the Delta. And the question is, how can we enhance this access to nature? I have a couple of approaches, just as very quick, explorations into how to make it happen. The first one has to do with regards to enhancing access to nature through enhancing access to nature with re-understanding the network of urban city parks in these numerous small towns, cities of the Delta. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to collaborate in the update of the urban plan for Weslaco, a city in Texas. Unfortunately, the parks in these small and often poor cities, this is one of the poorest areas of the United States, by the way. The parks are very kind of programmed oriented. They do not really offer more than active recreation. Therefore, there is a constant repertoire of missed opportunities to leverage the potential integration to nature and, of course, manage water in a way that is more than just managing quantities of water. Unfortunately, the infrastructure for water and flood control is done in a very kind of old school engineering approach, just with barrier-free channels or even in some cases underground channels, which of course do not leverage opportunities like the example of the Rio Grande, this Texas state park, which converted a former agricultural field into a wetland as a demonstration of the capacity of this landscape to recover, regenerate, and provide habitat, which results as well in economic activity, as you can see here with this, my students again, bird watching in this Texas State Park, or enjoying just a funny moment also right there in the park. So in this planning update, the update of the plan through pandemic determined community engagement, our proposal was very simple. Interconnect the present and existing system of city parks through a network based on the irrigation and drainage network of West Laco, Texas, but more importantly, rethink the way that infrastructure is done so that we can move away from this old school engineering approach that was not looking at flood and water management solutions from very far away from a nature-based approach, right? So how could we rethink it as a nature-based approach so that access to nature is enhanced, of course, because the city parks and the flood and water management infrastructure will be more present and near or nearer the communities where these people live, right? And another approach is just speculative design to inform reflection and research. This second project, very quickly, was a submission for a modular community for seasonal migrant farm workers. We did it also a few years ago. The problem persists. It's important to share these very recent images from a flood in the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo Delta from 2 months ago, which, by the way, was the largest rainfall recorded or measured in the Delta. It was over 21 inches of rainfall, which resulted again in flooding of neighborhoods and cities, the loss of millions of dollars in lost property, cars, as you can see here, right? So the point is that this binational, non-nature-based approach to water management is not working, right? And this image is taken from the location where we did the speculative project for this modular community, which once again flooded. We knew it flooded because it's actually built, as you can see in this mapping, it's built on a low point, on a depression, which was taken as the opportunity to sell the land to very low-income communities of South Texas in a form of development which is known as colonias, which is Spanish for neighborhood. The fact that colonia is in Spanish, it tells you who are the clients for this kind of unsafe development pattern in South Texas. So this is not just the only example. All of these floodable areas which coincide with very low-income neighborhoods are ubiquitous, both in the Delta and in Texas. So our proposal was a very simple approach. We integrate architecture in a modular approach, but also by looking at a modular approach as a foundation in farming done in intermittently floodable areas, as has been done, for example, over centuries and millennia in many other cultures, also in the Americas, for example, in the Central Valley of Mexico, the Chinampa system, a farming system which is based on shallow flooding areas where the availability of water and fertile soils makes up for a very dynamic and economically feasible farming opportunity. So, long story, the point is that we may need a new binational strategy to make it work. At the larger scale, the question is, can we rethink and adapt the binational Rio Grande flood control project that I presented and transform it into a nature-based system? And at the local scale, can the cumulative efforts of cities and local organizations, institutions, and NGOs create and connect nature-based spaces to provide access to the peoples of the Delta, access to nature, so they can re-engage with water, the river, and participate in the regeneration of nature? These are just some questions. I hope that the system could be rendered and extruded into a much more nature-determined patchwork, as opposed to just an agricultural patchwork, which is what we can see right now in the aerial image. And with that, I will close and thank you, and hopefully have time for some questions.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. If anyone's got questions, feel free to pop them into that question box at the bottom of the screen. To start off, I was interested to hear a little bit more about any successes that you've had with these green infrastructure or nature-based solutions in terms of, I suppose, showing their value when it comes to managing these flood events, because what we're finding, I suppose, in New Zealand is that we're really seeing the value of them. Recently here in Christchurch, we had significant rainfall, and we were lucky enough to have really positive a really positive outcome and less damage because of these wetlands that have been I suppose regenerated over years, and I'm wondering if you've seen similar value in some of these areas of your project work.
Well, that's part of the problem/motivation, because these systems are, of course, whenever I refer to green infrastructure, I'm talking about smaller scale interventions, right? Versus a larger nature-based system, as I think is opportunity for the Rio Grande Delta. But coming back to the point, it is still a struggle, even with these couple of pilot projects that we implemented. It is a fact that this is not yet a policy in Ambas Nogales, for example, in the first project that I presented in Ambas Nogales. It is not yet something that people just do, right? It is still sort of a pilot approach, which continues to be an experiment, right? And the problem, of course, is very complex, because the local communities, in particular, I would say developers, who are typically those who are tasked with the construction of infrastructure for new subdivisions, for new developments. There is a resistance, because all of these projects are understood as an additional burden and as a loss of income, as opposed to actually investing in the future. So I think, generally speaking, I would just say that I think is still prevailing a skepticism on the capacity of these systems, right? And hopefully, if more people approach it this way, for example, the Mexican federal government implemented a very well-known project a few years ago, which was looking at water management in a similar approach. So if you add that project with other smaller projects, but more importantly, in my opinion, the empowerment of local organizations and neighborhoods to make it happen, I think that's going to be the only way, because even if you make it part of local code, it is still something that is very difficult to enforce, require. Now, on the US side, it is something which is much more pervasively done, especially in Arizona and in Nogales, Arizona. Not the case of Texas, though. Texas has a culture of, everything is big in Texas, as they say, right? So Texas has a very different culture with regards to almost everything. There's much more sort of a much more of a capitalistic approach to the land. And uh, even if there is a significant presence of socio-ecologically oriented actors, the prevailing economic actor is agriculture, right? And agriculture is about distributing water and making sure that you can profit from an industrial scale of agriculture. So this is a very long way to reply. No, it is it is a struggle. Luckily, I will say that the projects are done, especially the Arizona projects, but any project like this is a multi-stakeholder project, right? And there are a lot of people. I think it's just a growing number of people, organizations, universities, researchers, practitioners, who are little by little making it bigger, and hopefully it will be able to flip the coin, let's say, right? In the I won't say in the near future. I would say in midterm future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is interesting. You talk about the how you found the success really happens when you take a bottom-up approach rather than top-down. And
Yeah.
I was interested to hear if the first project you talked about, the Ambas Nogales, were you doing was it a co-design approach with communities on both sides of that border?
Yeah, actually, to refer to those projects as designs coming from, in this case, Arkansas, because we were the landscape architecture team in that project. It's a little bit too much, actually, because in the end, it was more of a set of guidelines, which was actually implemented in a very different way on the ground. We had, as part of the grant, we had a local organization, a local NGO, whose expertise is all about sustainable farming and sustainable water management. So they were really the ones that worked with the local communities to make it happen. So in that regard, I think of the designs as guidelines, which were actually transformed on the ground. It's another important thing to say is that these projects were very low budget, but also very quickly implemented. Essentially, almost like a weekend project. Let's get together this weekend and let's make it happen. And to make it happen, I think most of the work was done by the local partner who was, before implementing it, was tasked with explaining the principles. This is why we're doing what we're doing, right? And then one weekend, let's get to it, right? I hope that there's going to be additional opportunities to continue to explore this in Arizona and Sonora. But I'll be honest, I'm farther away now from there. I'm closer to Texas, so I think my future steps are going to be looking more at nearby Texas, which is 1,500 kilometers away.
Yeah. Hey, that's fabulous. Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, I think it's very interesting to hear. Obviously, New Zealand is a landlocked. Is an island, and so we don't have these same considerations when it comes to designing or working with communities, between a border, as you've talked about today. So that's been really interesting and insightful. So thank you so much for your presentation. We really appreciate it. And it's been just wonderful speaking with you, Gabriel. So with that, the webinar has come to an end. A recording of the conversation will be available uploaded to the NZILA member dashboard in the coming days. This has been the first of our Streetscape series for this year, so keep an eye on the website for what's next. Thank you again, Gabriel and Mā te wā.
Thank you. Thank you.